candidates to meet you, the GB News viewers, and let you put your questions to them. Head directly to gbnews.uk or send me your questions to questions@gbnews.uk.
Join Alistair Stewart for the People's Forum with Liz Truss. Wednesday at 5, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The Edinburgh Fringe Festival begins, Sandy Toksvig grapples with the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Premier League football players stop taking the knee. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to the show. I've just returned from a flying visit to the Edinburgh Festival, the largest arts festival in the world, where for the month of August the city is overtaken by artists, musicians, comedians and thespians and, of course, punters. There are thousands of shows on the Edinburgh Fringe, and because most of them are only an hour long, you can watch multiple shows every day. I heard that the average audience for a Fringe show is 6. So as a writer or performer, you really do have to work hard to pull in the crowds in the face of so much competition. And one of the ways you can do this, of course, is to choose a controversial topic. Now, there used to be many controversial shows on the Fringe. Part of the appeal of the festival was trying to find those amateur theatrical groups who were trying desperately to be shocking. I remember seeing one devised piece about a psychopathic lesbian florist, which was staged in some subterranean cave. I think there were 3 of us in the audience. It was excruciatingly badly written, with melodramatic OTT performances and lots of fake blood. I absolutely loved it. Sadly, these days there's not so many people who are wanting to push the boundaries of good taste, possibly because the price for being controversial in the arts has become too high. But there is always one show every year at the Fringe that causes a stir for broaching a topic that many feel is beyond the limits of acceptability. And this year, that show is called Shannon Matthews The Musical, which is running at Just the Tonic for the whole month, every night at midnight. There was a bit of a gasp from my audience here. And that tells you everything. The show has caused outrage because the subject matter is extremely sensitive. And in case you've forgotten, Shannon Matthews was the little girl who went missing in Dewsbury in 2008 and sparked a search that cost £3.2 million. It transpired that her own mother, Karen Matthews, had hidden her child under a relative's bed in the hope of claiming the reward money. And she'd been making appeals on TV, had tricked the nation, ended up being sentenced to 8 years in prison. And now this bizarre tale has been turned into a foul-mouthed comedy musical, and many people aren't happy about it. Well, I can understand that. It must have been a traumatising experience for the girl, and one can understand why people would deem it an inappropriate subject for a musical. Now, the Dewsbury West councillor Amar Anwar has called for the musical to be banned. So this is what he said. He said, "The musical is sick and bang out of order. Imagine being that poor lass, Shannon, and reliving these cruel and sadistic moments again. This should never be allowed. What that child went through was disgusting and evil." Yes, kidnapping a child is disgusting and evil, but writing a musical about it which mocks the kidnapper, that's not the same thing. And yet critics like Anwar are behaving as though the show is some kind of reenactment of the crime. It's like Ricky Gervais has said, people confuse the subject of the joke with the target of the joke, and they're rarely the same. So should there be any limits in comedy? This seems to be a perennial subject for debate. It just never goes away. Some of the comedians who regularly appear on this channel have been the subject of media controversy because of jokes they have told. Scott Capurro, for instance, was attacked in the press for a comedy show he wrote about incest. He was also banned from Australian TV for a joke that was considered offensive to Christians. Josh Howie, another regular on this show, ended up on the front cover of the Jewish Chronicle for a joke he told about how the Holocaust couldn't happen in the UK. And his grandmother was very disappointed in him. Leo Kearse had a show cancelled by his venue because of complaints that it was transphobic, even though it was co-written by a trans person. It strikes me that a lot of this is down to a general misapprehension of what comedy is. I saw the Shannon Matthews musical last night, and the audience were howling with laughter. They're not laughing at what happened to that poor little girl. She isn't the subject of ridicule. It's the mother and her appalling crimes. Moreover, the reason why the show is so funny is the audacity of the thing. Everything about it is in the worst possible taste, and that's why it works. The audience are laughing in spite of themselves. Laughter, when it's authentic, is an involuntary reflex. It's a far cry from the kind of laughter you see in many comedy shows, where the act says an opinion popular with Guardian readers and the audience laugh to show that they approve. And comedy cannot exist without the possibility of causing offence. We should not be surprised, therefore, to see that comedians are regularly in the news for taking a joke too far. Recently, of course, it's been Jimmy Carr who's been in the firing line with the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, even suggesting that the law should be changed to criminalise some of his more controversial jokes if they appear on streaming services. But as an audience member, it's often exhilarating to have your certainties and sensibilities tested. It's almost cathartic. When a comic crosses that imaginary line, we're reminded of why we don't say these things. Comedy doesn't have to be transgressive, but shows like the Shannon Matthews musical remind us that they still can be. So for those people who are criticising the show without having seen it, or who are calling for it to be banned, I've got a solution for you. Just don't buy a ticket. There you go. Problem solved. And my studio guests this evening, I've got the lovely Nick Dixon and Toby Young. Now, Nick, weirdly, you haven't been cancelled, or no one's ever, been angry about your show. I think the most controversial thing about it is you were being a Christian.
No. I was cancelled for my opinions. Completely separate. No, I got cancelled for... someone sent me that thing, didn't they, saying that I couldn't get a gig because I was a straight white man.
Yes.
And I had the temerity to share it with a wry joke attached, and was cancelled for even acknowledging that happened.
I'd forgotten.
So I got cancelled for being a victim of discrimination.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, but my jokes are fine. They're just about relationships and baths and stuff.
That was really interesting because you had said, basically, to fill people in... So,
let's relive it.
Yeah, let's relive it. So someone else had put Nick up for a gig. Someone else had said, like, Nick Dixon's a really good comic, you should book him. The promoter replied saying, I'm not booking any more straight white men. OK? discrimination. You posted it, but you made a joke about it because you're a comic, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And then the comedy industry went mad at you, started saying, oh, look at this straight white man complaining he can't get gigs. It must be because he's not funny enough.
Yes, I got rubbish comic, and they didn't use that word, but I'm toning it down, and I got bigot. And all I'd done was shared it with all the sensitive information taken out so no one could dox the guy. And I just said something like, oh, I dream of a day when I can be judged by the content of my character or just the content of my content. So it was a kind of wry allusion to Martin Luther King.
Very intelligent. Smart.
Well, it was hyperbole for comic effect. But I got destroyed and, it got into the Express and the Telegraph. They actually defended me, and I was on the Jeremy Vine show being talked about. And Jeff Norcott defended me. But it just blew up for a week. But, yeah, my jokes are obviously completely milquetoast because it's never happened because of one of them.
Exactly. This is a weird thing, isn't it, Toby? I mean, obviously you're on the front line of the free speech battles, but comedy, for some reason, always ends up in the middle of these debates. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems very imprudent of the cancellers, of the kind of woke outrage mobs, to pick on comedians of all people, because, their Achilles heel is that they haven't got much in the way of a sense of humour, and they're making that really obvious by coming after comics. You'd think they'd go after genuine bigots rather than people like Nick,
I mean, I would... Well, I mean, you say that...
Thank you very much.
But, I can understand why someone would be upset by the idea of a musical about Sharon Matthews, which is a comedic... I can understand that, but then my solution to that would be not to go and watch it, not to try and stop other people from going to watch it.
At the Free Speech Union, we recently stood up for Roy Chubby Brown.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think he's particularly funny myself, but some people do, and I think if they want to go see him, they should be entitled to pay the ticket price.
Yeah,
and
was it Sheffield Council that banned his show?
They banned his show after a few complaints on the grounds that some of his jokes might be offensive. And it's like, well, if you find his jokes offensive, don't go and see him, don't buy the ticket.
Surely.
Don't stop everyone else from going to see him.
It's not that simple. I just think we had this with Mary Burke, who's a stand-up comic. She was on this show. She had a gig booked in Brighton, and, she's a jobbing comic. She depends on the income. And a couple of people contacted the venue saying, we feel unsafe because of her jokes. And so they pulled the gig. So,
I have seen Mary, and they were right. But the point it happened again with that Jimmy Carr joke, and you had Labour politicians saying, Jimmy Carr's joke, and they put it in inverted commas, and therefore they claim that it's not a joke. I'm like, well, he's a professional stand-up comedian, quite a famous one, at a comedy gig with a whole audience, and you go joke, therefore, oh, it wasn't a joke anymore, it was just a statement, apparently, because you've used inverted commas. So it's a disingenuous thing of taking it out of context deliberately.
Yeah, what's more likely, that a comedian at a comedy club is telling a joke, or that he's literally calling for mass extinction of certain groups of people?
Yeah. He was
what's more likely?
He was like, stop the gig, everyone, I've got a statement to make.
There was Occam's razor, isn't it?
Yeah, there was an SNP councillor who was so incensed by Jimmy Carr's so-called joke that she thought that anyone who laughed at it in the audience should also be punished in some way.
Yes,
just for laughing at it.
Said that. Was there an implication?
Be careful what you laugh at.
Yeah. So there was an implication you should be prosecuted for laughing at a problematic joke.
Yeah.
How are they going to enforce that?
That was a little bit.
They go around with like a laughometer, like measuring how hard you laughed. I mean, that's like Stalin, isn't it? When everyone had to clap for as long as possible. They didn't want to be the first one to stop clapping. You don't want to be the first one to be caught laughing in front of a Labour politician.
I think it's mad. Are you going to go up to the Fringe this year? See anything?
Oh God, no.
No.
No, I don't have to anymore. I have enough other work. I don't have to go to the Edinburgh Fringe. That's a great joy.
I was just there. I was looking for bad shows, because that's why I like to watch really terrible amateur theatre, And there are some really bad ones, and they're a lot of fun. But people aren't trying to shock anymore, and that's a shame. Is that just me?
It sounds like the Shannon Matthews one. It sounds like they're making a pretty good stab at it.
Oh yeah, I mean it was funny, but it was very bad taste.
Can I just quickly say, because people will be baffled by that, the only reason I don't like the Edinburgh Festival, as a comedian, you have to go for a whole month. You do the same show every night to often very small audiences. Everyone gets ill, and there are loads of comedians there, so that's why I don't like it.
Yeah, I think the avoidance of comedians is a good rule for life. Let's get some questions from the audience if we can. Our first question is from Myra. Hello, Myra.
Hello. Do you hate crime awareness courses?
Do I hate crime awareness? Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, so this is actually a story about Hampshire police who've decided to scrap hate crime awareness courses, which give people accused of hate crimes the chance to avoid prosecution if they go to a 2-hour education session. So this, Toby, is a bit like, when you break the speed limit and you have to sit in a session rather than get points in your licence. Is that kind of thing?
Well, that's sort of the general principle, but it's a little bit different. So in the case of this ex-army veteran, He was visited by the police because he had tweeted an image that Lawrence Fox created, which was essentially a reconfiguration of the pride flag, so it looked like a swastika.
Yes.
And the idea was to emphasise the kind of authoritarian, bullying undertone of some of the kind of pride celebrations.
Yes.
Quite controversial, in pretty poor taste, but it had even been reproduced in the Daily Mail, but this guy reproduced it on Facebook and got a visit from the local Hampshire constabulary. But what they said was, we think you may have committed a hate crime by putting this on Facebook, but we're willing to downgrade it if you attend this hate awareness course and pay us £100 to pay for the course. I've done the speeding course, but I think like him, I would have said no. And eventually they arrested him, but then dropped the charge.
What I'm confused about there, though, is if the point of the meme was to emphasise or draw attention to the potentially authoritarian nature of the police, and then what their response is to lead him away in handcuffs.
It sort of proves his point.
I would just avoid that. I think if I was a police officer, I'd be like, let's not prove his point. Let's not do that.
We're going to arrest you for suggesting that anyone dissenting from progressive orthodoxy might get arrested. It's like,
yeah. No, I mean, how do we deal with this, Nick? Because this is the thing about hate crime, the concept of hate crime. Should the police be auditing people's emotions? That's the first thing. You know, people, they love, they hate, they have envy. You know,
No.
Why?
Well, hate speech shouldn't... I don't even think hate speech is a thing, personally. I think perhaps direct incitement is a thing. But hate speech... See, it was a progressive Democrat judge, Lewis Brandeis, once said that the answer is more speech, not enforced silence. Yeah. I still believe in that. So I don't believe that in such a thing as hate speech. I just think there's speech and more speech. So that's me. Call me old-fashioned. But, so that's number one. In this particular case, it was especially absurd. The only thing Toby missed out there is that when they said, why don't you just arrest all of the Daily Mail editorial staff for publishing this, the police said, we don't have the manpower. It's like, we totally would. It's purely a resources question, guys.
Wow.
So that's absurd. So I don't believe in hate speech. This is an absurd police. As I said at the time, we don't have a police force anymore. We have a sort of enforcement arm of the woke ideology, which I think this proves. The only positive is that Donna Jones, I think the police commissioner, has said, we're going to stop doing this. And that's the only positive. It's a small victory.
OK, well, I'm going to be talking to Lawrence Fox about this later on, but I do want to ask you, Toby, because obviously you founded the Free Speech Union, this concept of hate speech, which is, you know, I've looked at the various manifestations of these laws across Europe, which are collected together in Paul Coleman's book, Censored, and you can see no one can agree on what hate speech is or how you define what is hateful. You know, is there any chance that we could repeal the hate speech laws that we currently have? Are we getting closer to that point?
I think the battle at the moment is to stop them becoming even more draconian rather than try and attempt to repeal them. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, hate speech is often a phrase people use to describe an opinion they passionately disagree with. So, for instance, we represented someone who was accused of hate speech because she started a petition on change.org urging the Oxford English Dictionary to keep its definition of woman as adult human female. And change.org took it down on the grounds that defining a woman as an adult human female was hate speech. And that just sort of, to me, proves how ridiculous it is.
My biology teacher was really hateful then. There you go. Yeah. And I would have liked to see her locked up. Anyway, not here to settle scores, but I didn't... Anyway, next question is from Barrett. Barrett.
Is the Beowulf really worth of a trigger warning?
Beowulf. Well, now, I had to study Beowulf, and, of course, a trigger warning has been applied. This is an Old English epic poem on many English literature courses, but Aberdeen University have now put a trigger warning onto this, and the academics are worried that students may read about, quote, monsters, and have put more than 30 warnings on the module entitled Lost Gods and Hidden Monsters of the Celtic and Germanic Middle Ages. Now, Toby, this reminds me of when one university put a trigger warning on Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, saying that it contained scenes of graphic fishing.
There was an even more absurd one, which was a trigger warning put, I think, on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Yes.
Apparently some children, not children, but some adults reading the book, studying it as part of a children's literature course, I think at Bath University, might have been upset by it.
Right.
And to me, it's so ridiculous because, you know, one of the purposes of reading these books, you know, if you properly engage with them and your imagination is engaged, then you want to be slightly traumatised. Right. You want to find them slightly scary. And, you know, that's part of... You want to go on the journey vicariously with the kind of hero and feel what he feels. But without feeling that kind of engagement, you don't have the full literary experience.
Well, I mean, which university was it that put a trigger warning on 1984? Which sounds like they're trolling, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
But they did that.
Was it Aston University?
That rings a bell. They said something like, you know, it contains disturbing themes. I'm like, well, it's a dystopian novel. I don't expect it to be uplifting.
Yeah,
and if you're in English literature, and there was another one, there was a great one, they put a trigger warning on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Kidnapped, saying it contains kidnapping. So, I mean, and that's already built into the title, guys.
Often the kind of underlying theme of these books, particularly books aimed at children, is you have to confront your fears.
Yeah.
You can't hide under the bed, your entire life. Part of the rite of passage of becoming an adult is confronting your fears. And they're saying to these students, no, remain infants, don't confront your fears, be warned, stuff in here may be frightening. So it defeats the whole point.
That's the point, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, we can mock trigger warnings. It seems like one of those silly culture war stories that doesn't really matter. And you might say, well, what does it really matter if you put a warning on the thing? But I think it's what it suggests about the mindset. It's basically infantilising adults. It's saying we need to look after you. And you know, it's patronising, ultimately, I think.
Well, I think it's even deeper than that. It's a clash, ultimately, of ideologies. I mean, we talk about these stories every time it's a new trigger warning. We laugh at them, graphic fishing. Obviously, they're absurd. But what is behind it, really, it's a clash of the English tradition of free speech, civil liberties, all these things, versus this new ideology. That's what it really is. And it's not racial, by the way, but it's... I mean, Carl Benjamin did a good speech about this. It's to do with our tradition, which is free speech. Anyone can come here, obviously, and enjoy that tradition. And, of course, the whitest possible people at the elite universities can be the opposite. They can be total communists. So it's not racial, but it does seem to be a tradition that we've all grown up with, which is why we laugh at it and why we say it's absurd, which is a tradition of free speech and civil liberties, all fairness, all the things we recognise, versus this new ideology. And that's why it keeps happening. And I'm almost sick of talking about these, because every time it's a new trigger warning, we laugh at it. But this is going to keep happening.
We don't address the problem. I suppose it's not censorship. That's the key point. It's not censorship. But what it is doing is it is signalling the idea that words are dangerous. And that's a dangerous trajectory, because that then changes the mindset.
And it's also significant that it's Beowulf, that it's a classic English text.
Yeah.
That it's a bit like when people attack Churchill, which, you know, he wasn't perfect, etc., but it's attacking fundamental things about a certain culture.
Also, how can you study English literature if you're not prepared to encounter troublesome things? I mean, Beowulf, the Old English, foundational text. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, you go forward to the Middle English, that story revolves around a decapitation. But if you're choosing to study literature, shouldn't you be expecting these kind of things?
Yeah, and to think that, you know, students, who are adults after all, aren't psychologically equipped to deal with this kind of traumatising experience is so patronising.
Yes.
And the emergence of trigger warnings and safe spaces has gone hand in hand with the kind of mental health crisis amongst adolescents and young adults. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think protecting them from any kind of trauma, trying to create a kind of cocoon of safety around them, leaves them unprepared to deal with the day-to-day conflicts of ordinary life.
Well, also, it's my understanding that cognitive behavioural therapists all agree that the very worst thing you can do if someone is suffering from trauma is to shield them from any references to that trauma ever again.
Yeah,
it's the opposite of what you should do.
It's the opposite of what you should do. It's a point that Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt make in The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah, I mean,
we're far too overprotective of young people, and it has the opposite effect. It doesn't make them any stronger. It just makes them more and more weak and vulnerable.
But you're being too generous. You're assuming they want to help young people become stronger, and they're overprotecting them. But, of course, what they're doing is imposing their ideology. It's leftist, extremist professors imposing their ideology. That's what I believe is happening. Because they're not actually trying to help the students.
Well, yes, but that's mind reading. You're thinking about what their intentions are.
And I am correct.
OK. You are very good at that whole mind reading thing. Quite astonishing. Anyway, next question now from Edward. Hi, Edward.
Should Alex Jones pay compensation over his lies about the Sandy Hook massacre?
So, this is Alex Jones. You will have seen these clips going online. He's the host of InfoWars. He's been ordered by a court to pay $4.1 million to the parents of a victim of the Sandy Hook massacre, and he had been claiming that it was a hoax. He no longer thinks that, though, does he? He has backed off on that, Nick.
You want me to talk about this again? OK, well, I've been warned, you see, that defending Alex Jones will get me cancelled. I've been warned repeatedly about this, but for some reason I have to do it anyway. So what it is...
You don't have to, Nick. It's free speech.
You have to tell the truth. Basically, So Alex Jones made these claims about the Sandy Hook families, obviously appalling, obviously very upsetting. He's admitted the mistake. He said it's 100% real. I made a mistake. We went down this conspiracy rabbit hole where he thought everything was fake. Then he realised when people started saying that he was Bill Hicks, the comedian that died in the 90s, OK, some conspiracies aren't real because he wasn't Bill Hicks. So he changed his mind. He said, OK, not all conspiracies are real. I need to calm down. And he's been punished for it. My point is that the people who are coming after him, I don't trust their motives. I don't trust them. There's pictures of the judge saying that she's a Democrat and that she's very pro-vaccine and things. I don't know if they're definitely real. But in general, the attack on Alex Jones is politically motivated. So in 2016, Trump came on his show did an interview.
Yes.
And he's got a massive audience, and he'd never backed a candidate before. He'd been very anti-Clinton, very anti-Bush. He'd been anti-establishment, but he backed Trump because he felt he was an anti-establishment candidate, and that was hugely effective. So, of course, they started attacking Alex Jones. It doesn't mean what he did was right. He made a mistake. But I saw The Guardian today saying this is a win in the battle against alternative facts. So there's a couple of things. No, they called it a war, in the war against alternative facts. So I learned a few things there. One, The Guardian's against Alex Jones, which is a red flag to me. Two, it's a war, which we already know it's a culture war. And three, The Guardian want to be in charge of the facts. Now, I don't trust the mainstream media to be in charge of the facts because look at the lab leak theory. Oh, COVID's come from a bat. Oh, no, it's from a lab, and we weren't allowed to say that. Or vaccines, stop all transmission. Even President Biden said it. Oh, they don't. So I don't trust the mainstream media to be in charge of the facts. I side with Alex Jones ultimately as someone on the side of freedom, even if he's very flawed and even if he made a big mistake.
Can I ask you about this, Toby? Because is this a free speech issue, or is this more to do with libel? Because he was saying that these parents were lying about one of the worst things that can happen to a parent, which is obviously very, very distressing. But when it comes to does that fall within the parameters of free speech?
I don't think this is a free speech issue.
Right.
And I don't think that this particular case brought against him in a civil court in America was politically motivated. I mean, the case was brought by the parents of a child who lost his life during the Sandy Hook massacre. And the reason they were bringing the case is because Alex Jones, I think he's recanted now, as Nick says, but originally claimed the Sandy Hook massacre was a false flag, that the parents seemingly mourning their dead children were crisis actors. It was all made up in order to bring about greater gun control.
Which is defamatory.
Which is, well, it was essentially saying these parents who've actually lost a child in a school shooting are making it up because they're somehow in league with people who want to stop us using our guns.
Yes.
And that is both false and defamatory. So it was... And that's why he lost the case. And I think he's acknowledged that it was false. But if I don't think free speech means you're entitled to say things which are false and defamatory about other people. So for me, it's not a free speech issue.
And the issue of libel...
Not my claim, by the way.
No, I mean, you're not saying that...
No. My claim is simply that the side I hate are salivating at this because they've been trying to destroy Alex Jones for years. He's the most banned person in history. You can't even say his name on certain platforms.
That's a different question.
That's a separate point.
Yeah, it's a separate point. But it does raise interesting questions because people often say, when it comes to libel, that you're not for free speech if you're for libel laws. I see them as completely compatible.
Yeah, it's completely compatible.
Because there are ways in which speech can be used as a mechanism to commit a crime. Perjury, blackmail, espionage. But free speech advocates aren't saying they're fine.
No.
It's really important that people understand what free speech is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
If only someone had written a book about it. Available online. Anyway, look, we've got to go to a break now, but we're going to get to some more questions later on. After the break on Free Speech Nation, he's created or co-created some of the greatest sitcoms of the last 30 years in the shape of Father Ted, Black Books and the IT Crowd. So Graeme Linehan will be joining me here in the studio. See you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Father Ted, Black Books and the IT Crowd are all regarded as among the best sitcoms of the last 30 years. And my next guest created, or co-created, all three of them, Graeme Linehan. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation.
Thank you very much.
Now, Graeme, you've been on the show before and we've talked about all of the things that have been happening to you over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And you've become embroiled in the debates around trans issues and women's rights and this kind of thing. And what's been happening recently is you've been very much vindicated, I think, in terms of what you've been warning about for many years. But perhaps you could talk us through, for the people who don't know, how did you go from comedy writing into this world?
Oh, God. Well, I just kind of started noticing that women were being really kind of violently abused online. And, there was a previous occasion where it happened, which I actually think I might have got slightly wrong in some ways, but it was called Gamergate. And I did exactly the same thing then. And I was praised by everybody. You know, all the people who went on to counsel me. But then I kept defending women when I wasn't supposed to.
Yes.
And that was when, you know, their sports started being destroyed, their private spaces started being taken away, and children started being medicalised. I wasn't supposed to keep up the feminism.
No, and you know, women were...
When all that happened.
We were seeing death threats, rape threats against feminists who wanted to preserve single-sex spaces, and you were calling that out.
Yeah, it was Gamergate again.
Yeah.
It was exactly the same language. I mean, the thing is, Gamergate, I think, had... so it was a kind of a weird thing that happened about, I think, 10 years ago now, where there was it was one of the first examples of a social media storm where no one could really figure out what was going on.
Yes.
But if you were on one side of it, you had a very simplistic take on it, which is these people are evil and they want to drive it. But then, you know, the more I found out about it, the more I've realised that some within that social storm, whatever you might call it, were actually warning about the type of thing that we've been coming up against now.
Yes.
Which is, you know, the rise of queer theory, postmodernist thought in academia, you know, all these trickle-down things that are leading to such problems now, like the drag queen story hour protests, which are getting worse and worse, and they're going to lead to someone getting hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, in short, I suppose we are talking about a group of activists who are now very powerful in society, who believe that gender should be prioritised over biological sex, and that has ramifications for gay people, it has ramifications for women, you know, and you've been speaking out about it, and for doing so, you've been utterly cancelled and vilified.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so kind of... it's been a strange couple of years, but at the same time, I don't see how I could have done anything else. I don't really see how anyone can go along with this. It's so obviously harmful to gay people. Like Stonewall, you know, bullied Alison Bailey through Garden Court Chambers. Pink News, which is a big propaganda rag for gender ideology, has been sued successfully twice by 2 different lesbians.
Yes.
This is an anti-gay movement. But it's very hard to explain to people because they just see it tied up with you know, all the kind of pride celebrations and they just think, oh, no, well, you know, why are you making a fuss?
Yes.
And you get the same kind of response that the lesbians who actually... There were a group of lesbians a couple of years ago who lay down in front of Pride simply because no one was listening to them and everyone was calling them names.
Well, I think Stonewall...
And they couldn't get heard otherwise.
Stonewall dines out on its reputation from many years past, and people don't realise that it's changed. And people don't understand why so many gay people are offended by Stonewall, by the idea of them redefining homosexuality as being same-gender attracted, saying that women who don't want to sleep with people with penises are sexual racists, the phrase?
Yeah, Nancy Kelly said that lesbians were guilty of a form of sexual racism by not wanting to sleep with men.
Yeah. So this is... Which strikes some people. I mean, you laugh, but it sounds homophobic.
She's still in charge of Stonewall, which is supposed to be an LGBT rights organisation. It's just extraordinary.
Yes.
And what's the weirdest thing about it is that none of these people can see how offensive it is, can see... Like, saying that lesbians should examine their prejudices about sleeping with men is a form of rape culture, you know?
Yeah.
And it's being pushed by all these people, many of whom I think are just credulous and don't really realise what they're taking part in. They just kind of, you know, they put their hand over their heart and they say the mantras, whatever they're meant to say. They think they're helping. But in a few years, we're going to look back at all the kids who've been through the Tavistock, 9,000 kids over 30 years with no follow-up studies.
Yes.
And that is going to be a mental health crisis and just a health crisis that's going to last for God knows how long.
Well, we're starting to see the lawsuits. I mean, Richie Herron, young gay man who no longer has genitals because he followed the advice of people who just affirmed his views on gender, and is now suing the NHS. For people who don't know, the Tavistock Clinic, the paediatric gender identity clinic, has now been told to shut down because the Cass report has said it is unsafe for children because children were coming along and being put onto puberty blockers after 1 or 2 consultations. A child says they're unsure of that they think they might be in the wrong body, and instead of investigating that and considering maybe they might be autistic, they might be gay, they might have all sorts of reasons for gender nonconformity, they just were affirmed and put on a path to medicalisation. It's a massive scandal, right?
It's a massive scandal. And the thing about it that I find most extraordinary is that all the evidence for the scandal has been in full public view for a number of years.
Yes.
If you want to see something extraordinary, have a look at Susie Green's TED Talk.
Yes.
She's the CEO of Mermaids. And essentially she stands up to a bunch of nerds at the TED Talk and basically says that the reason she thought her kid was a different sex was because he liked girls' toys.
Yes.
And that's like the only reason given.
Yeah.
Cut to, the kid is 16 years old. She takes him to Thailand for the operation. This is after years of putting him on hormones.
So often, these diagnoses are largely driven by gender stereotypes. So,
yes, but also parents who, you know, for whatever reasons, there was definitely homophobia, as Susie Green says, in the TED Talk in her own home. The kid was obviously trying to please the parents.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole host of things going on there. But nothing is examined because this ideology has accepted that there's a type of special person called a trans person, right? That are like gay people and that are like... But it's not true. It's like trans is as a category is so wide, it means nothing now.
So we're not talking about people who suffer from gender dysphoria, trans people who need to transition because they can't be happy without that.
No.
And those people exist and they need support. But you're not quite...
No, like I'll give you a good example. There's someone who's on the advisory board, the trans advisory board at Stonewall. And his name is Alex Drummond. He's got a full beard. And he wears dresses, and he thinks that makes him a special, you know, magical person that's never existed before.
Yeah.
And it's nonsense.
So
and it's insulting. It's insulting to women. Like in Ireland, I don't know if you saw it just the other day, but there's this bald bloke who makes...
I did see this.
He makes absolutely no concession to, you know, not even a bit of lippy or an earring. You know,
yeah.
It's just he's just
playing football, right?
He's playing football against much younger girls. You know, the girls were under 16s, I believe. He's like in his 30s.
And I've seen...
What's he doing on that team?
What's incredible about that as well is the image of that's been shared online. Feminists have been kicked off Twitter for sharing that image and saying, this is a man.
Well, that's another thing that I'm hoping will kind of will come out over the next few years, which is that, you know, people like me and Posey Parker and Megan Murphy and Holly Lawford-Smith, we weren't banned from Twitter for hate speech. We were only banned from Twitter because we refused to bend the knee to this new ideology.
Can I ask you about this? So, in addition to your Twitter ban, you were visited by the police, yes?
Yeah, I think I've been visited now. I was visited twice or 3 times. I've got a call from them once.
OK. And because of what, specifically?
One was a con man got the police on me, then his friend got the police to come around one day.
Because of things you'd said about this discussion, this debate.
Yeah, but in the case of the con man, I was specifically saying this bloke is a con man.
OK, I see.
And and not only that, but like the female name he'd given himself was one of about 3. There was a very funny moment during his court case where someone said, you know, isn't it true that you were in jail? And he said, oh, that was just for passing bad checks in Wales. I was like, yeah, that's illegal.
Yeah. So you've been through all this. Now, can you talk to us a little bit about what has this meant for your career? You know, you're so well known for your sitcom writing.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not It's not really...
I'm not really feeling very funny at the moment,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
I've had... I spent like 5 or 6 years writing a musical, the Father Ted musical, which we had it on its feet. It was ready to go. And now Hat Trick Productions and Sonia Friedman Productions are just sitting on it. And they refuse to produce it. Not only that, but they refuse to tell me what I've done wrong.
And it's because your name is attached. That's the problem.
They say if I remove my name from my own show, then they'll be able to move ahead with it. So I'm refusing on the grounds that I haven't done anything wrong.
Right. I mean, you just have an opinion that they don't happen to share.
Yeah,
What's that got to do with the show?
It's not just that. It's such a level of cowardice from these people. They could stand up for me. They could say, "Hang on a second, Graeme has every right to talk about this issue," but instead they scurry away. They try and avoid any kind of mention of I don't get any emails. They don't respond to emails.
Right.
They won't tell me what I'm supposed to have done. So I'm unfortunately looking at legal action.
Yeah. But if you could go back, you wouldn't change anything.
No, because it's so obviously wrong. As I said, 9,000 kids. How on earth are we so blasé about kids' health? How on earth did it come about that these drugs sterilise children? One of the drugs is Lupron, which is a kind of a ancestor of the drug they gave to Alan Turing. And you remember when the Alan Turing kind of anniversaries were coming around, and I was like, oh, what they did to poor Alan Turing. And now they're doing it to gay kids now.
Yeah.
But they're saying that this is great, and it's sterilising them, it's taking away their sexual, desire. And these kids, they don't know what they're signing up to. This is the most evil grooming movement I've ever seen. It really is.
We are now, though, seeing lots of changes. And, today we had the story about Dominic Raab now saying he's going to say that men who identify as women can't go to women's prisons.
May I tell you a funny story about that?
OK.
OK, here's the story about that, right? I met Kate Deacon, who runs Keep Prison Single Sex. It's not funny, it's horrible. But she said that the reason why male prisoners were put in women's prisons, first of all, was because they literally thought, no one cares about female prisoners, this will be our foot in the door, and then we can get self-ID in other areas.
Yes.
Yes. And sure enough, without anyone realising, this has been the policy for the last 4 or 5 years.
But no one knew, and that's why I've told people about...
Maybe longer than that, sorry.
When I've told people about the case of Karen White, identifies rapist, identifies as female, goes to a female prison, and commits sexual assault on inmates. People think that can't have happened.
Yeah,
and so they think I'm lying, but it did happen.
Well, that's why my website, I don't think anyone really shares my website, because everything I put on it looks like I've made it up. It looks like something out of Father Ted, And it's like, as I said, I wrote somewhere recently, as soon as I started telling the truth, people stopped believing me, But that's kind of what's happening at the moment. It's just an extraordinary thing. My website, like every story, is more unbelievable than the last story.
No, I've seen it. It definitely is. We don't have much time, but I do want to ask just finally about this, because there's the closure of the Tavistock, there's Alison Bailey winning her case against her chambers. She didn't win against Stonewall, but it was found that Stonewall had given terrible advice, so no one's going to touch Stonewall with a barge pole now, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah.
So, because it's cost them a lot of money.
Yeah. Sure.
So don't you think that with all of these things, that maybe we're on that cusp, things are changing, and ultimately people are going to say, yeah, well, maybe he was right all along?
I'll tell you what the problem is at the moment. I mean, you really should be commended for covering this subject at all. But the problem at the moment is that, for instance, if you read The Guardian, you kind of have no idea that the Tavistock happened.
Yeah.
They may have covered it once, they may have just... But they generally try and either frame these kinds of stories so that it looks like we've done something wrong. Like, for instance, with Alison Bailey, even though Stonewall's advice was found to be illegal, it was found that it wasn't illegal for them to give it.
That's right. So the chambers didn't have to take the advice.
Exactly.
But it was terrible advice that cost them thousands of pounds, right?
Exactly, So hopefully... But, it's like they try and nitpick all these things, and what it really needs is it needs a proper investigation. It needs a team to figure out what on earth happened in the last few years that so many gender non-conforming and gay kids were put through this, as my friend Dennis Kavanagh calls it, the gender abattoir, Like where kids are put back into a closet made of their own bodies,
Yeah.
How did that happen? And the fact is that it's to the great shame of the BBC that they have not yet had the urgent national conversation that's needed around this issue.
To be honest, Graeme, I think it's a question for historians.
Yeah,
probably.
maybe.
But anyway, thank you ever so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, the editor of the British Comedy Guide will be here to talk about the demise of Mock the Week after 17 years. See you in 2 minutes. Thank you, Graeme.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So, popular comedy series Mock the Week is set to end after more than 17 years. The show's host, Dara O'Brien, said in a statement, "That's it, folks. The UK has finally run out of news. We just couldn't be more silly than the news was already." So, launched in 2005, Mock the Week had been a platform for regular panellists, including Frankie Boyle, Russell Howard and Zoe Lyons. Let's take a little look.
Lines you wouldn't hear in kids' films and TV shows.
Honey, I shrunk the kids. I really shouldn't have smoked when I was pregnant.
Hi, I'm Mowgli, and I'm an alcoholic.
Yes, I may be from Peru, but I'm certainly not carrying drugs, said Paddington. Why are you putting the rubber glove on?
So to discuss how this will impact the comedy circuit, I'm joined by the editor of the British Comedy Guide, Aaron Brown. Thank you for being here. So, Aaron, are you a fan of Mock the Week? Have you enjoyed this show for many years?
I have been watching it since the start, yes. I think it had perhaps had a bit of a slightly lower patch in the early 2010s, but
Yes.
had really got a lot stronger in the last few years again, with some a really strong kind of rotation of guests who felt a lot more comfortable together and comfortable with the format, and it was slightly less adversary than it had perhaps been.
It had that reputation, didn't it? Particularly in the early days. And something that it strikes me that the show has evolved in a really interesting way, because early on you had Frankie Boyle, people like that saying very, very edgy things. And there was an old joke about it's called Mock the Week because they mock the week. And and then that sort of shifted. Something happened probably around 8-7 years ago, didn't it?
Yeah, so I think, as with so much in not just comedy, but in our wider culture of the past few years, it really all started to change around Brexit.
Right.
I don't think there was anything planned, anything. It was just kind of a natural evolution because of the way politics and cultural and topical discussions were dividing along those kind of lines.
But they weren't dividing within the comedy industry, and I think that was part of the problem. I mean, Marcus Brigstock spoke about how when he's touring his show, and he was obviously slagging off Brexit voters, as most comics were doing, and people were walking out because not everyone lives in London in middle-class houses.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of the paradox of Brexit in comedy is that comedy is traditionally, or at least stand-up comedy, is traditionally somewhat radical, somewhat anti-establishment, and yet here comedians found themselves almost entirely on the side of the establishment, on the side of the status quo.
Yes.
And, you know, the side against change. And that is completely alien from almost anything else since the modern wave of comedy started in kind of the early 80s.
And yet the way that comics who do try to take an anti-establishment position, they're often demonised by people within the industry. This is happening more and more. So, you know, if you take the Brexit example, there were just a few of us who were pro-Brexit comedians, and we were told we were far right, evil, all this nonsense. So, but that was coming and very much being policed within the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to know kind of exactly what the driving force behind that was. If there, I suspect that there wasn't like a particular organisation that they all sort of said, well, let's push this agenda, not that one.
Yeah,
I think it was quite an organic decision that everybody kind of arrived at the same time because they were of that viewpoint.
Well, I mean, it was just a kind of level of conformity. I had comics say to me in private, you know, well, you know, I sort of agree with what you're saying, but I'd never say it publicly. There was just a kind of general sense that there's one opinion you're allowed to have on this issue. You know, that was it.
And it's, you know,
it's kind of boring for comedy.
Yes, it's boring for comedy. It's, you know, it is a valid viewpoint to have. You know, I don't agree with it personally. I'm sure most of the viewers of the show tonight don't agree with it, but, you know, it is a valid view to have. It is valid that some comedians have that view and be putting it forward in their shows.
Yes.
But to have every comedian putting the same view forward, often in largely the same terms, really didn't do comedy necessarily the good that such a divisive and important issue could have done. There were no arguments being made. There was no interesting discussions. It was all very much...
Yeah, but it's also like, you know, some agreement. Of the people... The EU was ripe for mockery. All of these centre-right, you know, political figures, Verhofstadt, you know, the people who were behind a lot of this in the European Commission, they were figures of fun. You know, Donald Tusk. I mean, these are people that you should be mocking, but they, you know, no one wanted to do it. Do you think that this kind of homogeneity within the comedy industry, when it comes to politics, accounts for or has contributed towards the inevitable demise of Mock the Week?
I think it hasn't helped. I think Mock the Week has been harmed by other factors within comedy and within television more generally. As it kind of pursues... Television is essentially, at the moment, pursuing a self-fulfilling agenda of subserviency to the streaming platforms.
Yes.
They see lower audiences, so the commissioning decisions change and the scheduling decisions change, and then the audiences aren't coming for the shows that are already on, and so those ratings drop further and further, and everything kind of goes on a downward spiral.
Do you think then that comedy commissioners need to be less risk-averse when it comes to comedy?
Yeah, I think this is true across genres, actually, and not just comedy. Of course, in comedy it is probably most acute at the moment. But, yeah, definitely there needs to be more diversity of style of programme, of, you know, thought and, opinions and sort of lifestyles and culture within programmes. You know, if you think about the kind of sitcoms that are around today, there is very little that you could call a kind of working class culture, either representing or particularly appealing to in its humour.
Yes.
There's nothing, very little, that's broad, that would attract multi-million viewers. You know, today we talk about comedy greats as being shows like The Likely Lads or Porridge, Blackadder, Fawlty Towers, Dad's Army. Do you think there's anything around at the moment that people will be talking about in the same kind of terms in another 40 years?
I'd say no.
No. Now, I think that there is nothing around at the moment that doesn't deserve to exist on its own merits, but it is all so very tonally similar, all coming from a place of the same it's a very middle class kind of intelligentsia, to use that elite kind of terminology. It's that kind of outlook, and it doesn't really appeal beyond the big metropolitan centres.
Absolutely. Well, maybe things will change now when these older shows are falling away.
We can but hope.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Aaron. Really appreciate it. After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by author and academic Joanna Williams, who's going to be discussing whether the menopause should be a legally protected characteristic. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. According to MPs on the Cross-Party Women and Equalities Committee, highly skilled and experienced women are being forced out of the workplace due to a lack of support from employers when they have menopausal symptoms. They are calling for the Equality Act to be amended so menopause will be a protected characteristic, and they also want employers to be required to make reasonable adjustments for menopausal workers. Here to discuss this with me, I'm delighted to welcome author and academic Joanna Williams. Thanks for joining me, Joanna. It seems to me that there are lots of groups who are often trying to expand this list of protected characteristics. You've had veganism, for instance. Should menopause be one of them?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a ridiculous suggestion, and I think it's actually, personally find it quite offensive to suggest that middle-aged women need to be legally protected in a way that other people are not. But I mean, it really tells us something about the way that politics and political activism is going nowadays. Essentially, when there's any disparities seen, any inequalities that might be spotted, rather than looking for logical explanations really as to why this might be the case, the first recourse of activists is to seek to expand the remit of the law to get this added onto legislation. I mean, it's not too far-fetched, I don't think, to suggest that in 5 or 10 years' time, if we carry on going the way we are, every single feature of a person will be protected in one way or another. Every identity group will be protected.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I'm not an expert when it comes to the menopause, but from what I understand, it can be very stressful. And is there not a case to be made that special protections need to be put in place, or there needs to be at least some understanding of what people are going through?
Yeah, I think that's true. But the idea that when women reach middle age, having juggled family life, working, careers, all the difficulties that everybody faces in society, women are not capable of saying to their boss, "Oh, do you know what? I wouldn't mind the temperature being turned down. I need to take a couple of hours off for a doctor's appointment," and actually negotiating those situations and having those conversations themselves is a bit insulting, because what it's actually suggesting by this kind of demand for preemptory changes is that as soon as any woman hits middle age, she needs to be treated as a bit of a quivering wreck. And that is far more offensive than actually just leaving women to get on. It's a natural life stage at the end of the day, and it could be something that lasts for 7 to 10 years. You're essentially treating all women, or potentially labelling all women as falling into some category of having special needs at the time of their life, when for lots of women, they're feeling very productive, spared from children maybe growing up, leaving home, less family responsibilities, and are really ready to get cracking with their careers. And actually the message that's being sent out from MPs is that women need special treatment. They need to be wrapped up in cotton wool at this point in their lives.
Now, I've read your book, Women versus Feminism, and in that book you do talk about the way in which feminism more generally has become kind of overwhelmed with this, I suppose, paternalistic view of women, and that it's more a kind of a victim-centred view of what it means to be a woman. Do you want to explain what you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting when a lot of these women MPs who are driving forward this demand for increased legislation, they kind of make this argument that there's a stigma around discussing menopause. I actually stop and think for 1 second, where is this stigma? It seems like every time you turn on the television nowadays, or every time you walk into a bookshop, there's some celebrity who has just brought out their latest How to Survive a Menopause manual, or some special cookbook to help you eat your way through a better menopause, or a documentary detailing how to have a good menopause. We talk about nothing else but the menopause, it seems. Where is this stigma? But the fact is that the women who are fronting this campaign, they are middle class, probably more than middle class. They're incredibly wealthy, elite, privileged women who are also incredibly capable and are able to negotiate their way through lives through book deals and television contracts incredibly successfully. And yet it seems like they found this, the issue of menopause, as something that can give them victim points in a society where being a victim gives you a lot of social status nowadays.
But I thought feminism was all about empowerment as opposed to wallowing in being a victim. So what changed?
Well, it's a very good question. And of course, a lot of these women would say that this is what they are doing. They're encouraging people to kind of be empowered through the menopause. But the form that their empowerment takes is kind of extra tissues at work, your boss coming around giving you a fan so you can fan yourself, make yourself cooler. One of the suggestions, and this was by a police force somewhere, I think it was in Nottingham a couple of years ago now, was actually to have a kind of crying room. You know, it's actually called that. You know, this is a room set aside, presumably there'd be a nice bunch of flowers and a box of tissues. And if you're feeling a bit weepy during the course of the day, you know, poor little women can go and sit in there and have a cry. Now, to all intents and purposes, that is saying that women in the workplace, they can't cope. You know, they need this room to go and sit in and cry. And that's horrible. That's a really terrible message to send out about women. But clearly, a very elite, privileged group of women get far more kudos nowadays, far more status. They get the book contracts, they get the television programmes off this presentation of themselves as being victims, rather than actually standing up and saying, do you know what, we're fine, thank you, and we're coping, and we're doing just right.
Joanna Williams, thanks ever so much for joining me today. It's just after 8 o'clock. This is Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's go back to the audience now for some more questions. We've got a question now from Martin. Where's Martin? Hello.
Was Sandy Toxvig correct in calling out the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Yes, so some of you might have seen this on Twitter. Sandy Toxvig, of course, a broadcaster and author, posted an open letter to Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, after he had affirmed the validity of a 1998 resolution which said that gay sex was a sin. Toxvig wrote to Welby, so you and your other religious pals got together at the Lambeth conference, and the main takeaway seems to be that gay sex is a sin. You didn't have other more pressing matters like, I don't know, war or poverty. Nick, you're a Christian. Do you think that this theological debate was sufficiently rigorous?
Well, firstly, this question of the word sin, this is how they stitched up Tim Farron. I mean, when you detach sin it only has meaning in a religious context. So what they tried to do to Tim Farron was basically try and get him to say that, oh, do you think gay people are bad? Because sin is used colloquially, you know, in the cultures of mean bad, but really only has meaning in religious context. So when you say something's a sin, many, many things are a sin.
Yes.
There's huge amounts of sins. I mean, Matthew talks about, you know, not looking at another woman with lust or something. You know, there's endless sins. So they try and stitch people up using that word sin. The other thing I'd say is, I mean, Welby here actually sounded a bit... He actually did uphold Christianity for a change, but he then still said that he's going to support same-sex marriages in churches anyway, if they want to do that.
Yeah, but he's walking a tightrope, isn't he? Between you know, the convictions of the traditional church, the Anglican church abroad, particularly in Africa, but also his own particular views, which are more on the, shall we say, woke side.
Well, yes, he has a broad range of churches to sort of appease, and he has to take a sort of central line on it. Yes, so he can't necessarily do exactly what Sandy Toxvig wants. I mean, the state religion is already the LGBTQ plus stuff. That's the state religion we have now. And so, but that's not enough for Sandy. She wants to take the whole church as well. And I just say, you're not even going to allow the Christian church to be Christian. I mean, it's a bit like there was a tweet going around the other day, this drag queen story type thing. There was drag queens in the church. And I say, like, are we not allowed some spaces for, you know, where we're allowed to be Christian rather than the new religion, which is the woke ideology?
What do you think, Toby, of Sandy Toxvig's foray into theology?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit presumptuous of her to kind of try and teach, you know, the most senior bishop in the Church of England the rudiments of Christianity.
Yes.
You know, it's like... and I think at one point she said, Jesus never spoke about sex. Why are you talking about sex? Well, actually, he did. You know, he discouraged people from committing adultery, for instance, or from coveting their neighbour's wife. You know, he re-emphasised those commandments. And also, I mean, I couldn't help but note that she didn't write to any other religious leaders to complain about the attitudes of homosexuality, for instance, in the Islamic tradition.
No. There's a letter coming to an imam about that. I've absolutely no doubt that's going to happen next. And how they should have gender-neutral toilets at the mosque. But I think it'll go down really well. It'll go down really well. It was odd, wasn't it? But when she started getting into theological territory and talking about how Sodom and Gomorrah really wasn't about homosexuality, it really was.
I mean, it's about being kind to strangers, she said.
Well, I mean, there's an element of hospitality and within that moral message. There absolutely is. But there is also an element of...
But I think it did reflect where, you know, moral authority presently lies in our society.
Yes.
Someone like Sandy Toxvig has a kind of moral authority now that the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't. And she was sort of, you know, exercising her moral muscles by saying, no, this is what you should be saying, even if you're a Christian.
But why... It's a bit much when you're having to go to the Church of England for not being woke or lefty enough. Do you know what I mean? That's really what she was saying. I'm like, could it get any more woke? Apparently it still could by a couple more inches.
But what I was interested in, the way in which he immediately said, oh, well, I'll meet you for a coffee.
Yes.
It was almost like he was terrified.
Yeah, because like Toby says, she has the moral authority in our culture, so of course he would be terrified. But she actually said Jesus didn't talk about sexuality. Strictly speaking, that was a quote. But although he wasn't really faced with the Tavistock Clinic and drag time story hours, it was a different time. But drag queen story hour. But yeah, it was a different time. But so what's my other? I had one other point about it, but it doesn't matter. You can guess what it probably was. It was probably
some more reactionary nonsense
exactly.
from Nick Dixon. Anyway, we've got another question now. This is from Catherine. Catherine, hello.
Hi. Has Dominic Raab got it right about trans prisoners?
So the Mail has reported on this. This was just today that transgender prisoners who are biologically male are going to be blocked from serving time in women's jails. This is Justice Secretary Dominic Raab set to implement this policy whereby ministers have to give the green light before any male-bodied inmates who identify as women can be moved to a women's prison. Now, I touched on this earlier with Graeme Linehan, Toby, and, you know, it just strikes me that how do we get to this point anyway where a man convicted of sexual assault identifies as a woman and moves to a women's prison, where there's lots of vulnerable women?
I mean, it does seem like, as far as kind of conservative policies go, quite low-hanging fruit and pretty extraordinary that, you know, he hasn't piped up about this before now. And it's almost as though Dominic Raab himself is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party. A couple of days ago, he said, we're going to come down hard on killer cyclists. And now it's, we're going to stop male sex offenders pretending to be women and going into women's prison and sexually assaulted women. It's like, yeah, I think he wants to hang on to his job as Justice Secretary. I think that's what it must be.
Fair enough. I mean, Nick, you must have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, I don't have anything amazing other than what Toby said. It's low-hanging fruit. I mean, we were all at the House of Lords. Sorry to out you two, but we were at the House of Lords and Kemi Badenoch was speaking. And at one point she said, you know, I am a woman and I know what one is. And that got a round of applause. And on one hand you go, well, that's good. On the other hand you go, really, is this where we are, that this is the level? So the idea that, yeah, men shouldn't go into women's prisons and wreak havoc, pretty low-level stuff, but where the culture's so absurd that we're actually grateful for these crumbs of sanity.
Yeah. I should
say phrase, crumbs of sanity.
We don't just hang out at the House of Lords. We're not like part of this elite group. Because that's what people think. It's not that.
I am part of the elite.
It was an event. It was a free speech event.
It was us and Klaus Schwab.
Got another question now from Mary. Where is Mary?
Hi.
Hi, Mary.
Why do you think Warner Brothers cancelled the Batgirl movie?
Yeah, the Batgirl movie. I'm sure it was dreadful. So this Warner Brothers have cancelled the Batgirl movie. It's not going to be released in any format. It's just going to go down the memory hole. And the studio apparently spent $90 million on it. But the test audiences hated it so much. What happened here, Toby?
I'm hoping that the reason he cancelled it is because it was just too woke. So, you know, it was a race-swap superhero movie. So Batgirl was being played by a mixed-race woman, a woman of colour.
Yes.
And her best friend, her flatmate, was trans. It was directed by the people that brought us Ms. Marvel, the most woke Marvel TV spin-off on Disney+, which is saying something.
So this was just really preachy, basically.
It was written by this feminist who's written this kind of man-hating thriller called Birds of Prey. I mean, it was like the ultimate ultra-woke superhero movie. And I think the new boss of Warner Brothers Discovery, having kind of cut his teeth by cancelling CNN Plus a few weeks after it launched, now thought, I know, I'm going to cancel the most woke movie on our slate.
Yes.
And I think it is sending a signal, you know, across Hollywood that from now on we want to make movies like Top Gun Maverick and not, you know, race-swap superhero.
Well, that got a good reaction from the...
You know Toby wasn't in it.
I did quite like Top Gun Maverick.
I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was quite good. It was quite...
flying. Yeah, well, this does sound like a case of go woke, go broke, very literally, because they've wasted $90 million. Haven't seen the movie, obviously, no one has. But imagine this. They didn't release the movie because it was so bad. They released The Last Jedi, but they didn't release this. Imagine how bad it must have been. Look at what they release and then think about that. I'm terrified about
but the thing about Last Jedi, I mean, it could have been just really terrible and still done well because of the brand, right? Batgirl, no one really cares about Batgirl, do they?
No, I do care now. I want to see it. I mean, it's the worst movie ever made. Not even going to go straight to video. That bad. Cost $90 million. I kind of want to see it.
The only thing that's sad is that Michael Keaton and Brendan Fraser are in it, and they are both brilliant.
Oh, I love Michael Keaton, yeah.
Again, how bad must it have been that they couldn't even save it?
I didn't know there was a Batgirl. Is she like a niece or something? What's the relevant? I genuinely don't know who she is.
Yeah, I think wasn't there a Batgirl? There was a Batgirl movie, I think.
Was there?
Didn't do very well. Was it Catwoman?
There was Catwoman.
Wasn't Alicia Silverstone Batgirl many years ago?
Was she? Okay, well, I'm sorry. I'm not up on my anthropomorphic heroes.
How dare you?
I mean, I do remember Supergirl. There was a Supergirl.
Helen Slater.
Yes. No, that was quite good, wasn't it?
I had a massive crush when I was a kid.
Oh, did you indeed?
Yeah.
Well, getting off topic now. Let's. Our next question is from Jesus.
Hi, Andrew.
Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Jesus.
The Church of England one.
Jesus. Is it Jesus?
Jesus, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yes.
It's all right. Good to meet you.
Confusing the people at home then.
My question is, should Premier League footballers continue to take the knee?
There's been lots of discussion about this, whether Premier League footballers should continue to take the knee. They started, of course, taking the knee in support of Black Lives Matter after George Floyd's murder in May 2020. And then the gesture has been performed everywhere at all Premier League matches since then. But apparently going forward, the gesture will only be seen at certain matches, including the Boxing Day fixtures and cup finals. Now, Nick, I know you've spoken a lot about this before, so you must have some thoughts about this. Am I right thinking you're a bit sceptical about Black Lives Matter as a movement?
What a generous way of putting it. Yeah. I've been criticised like everything. Well, the problem I had with this was, obviously, Black Lives Matter, radical organisation, seems to be a far-left organisation, seems to endow the owners with a certain number of mansions, allegedly, we can't talk about. So Black Lives Matter has been exposed as a bit of a scam. But my problem was always... By the way, they did the kneeling today. I watched Man United get beaten today, unfortunately, and they did the kneeling. Oh, an anti-United guy there. Sadly, that's my team, where we're not doing as well as we used to. But they kneel today, so they're going to kneel on certain occasions. Right. The start of the season was deemed one of these occasions. Now, if it's a good gesture, do it. If it's not, don't do it. Why only for special occasions? We'll bring it out on Boxing Day. It's absolutely bizarre. My problem with it always was it's a specific political, controversial organisation. And what Sky Sports and others did, they started trying to gaslight us and say, no, it's just an anti-racism gesture. Meanwhile, the specific BLM logo was emblazoned on the screen and on the advertising boards. It's like, Martin Tyler, who are you fooling? We know what this is. So the big mistake they made, whether it was deliberate, I say mistake from my perspective, we used to have campaigns like kick out racism, give racism the red card. Everyone was behind them. Everyone was anti-racism. Black Lives Matter was very different. It was a highly politicised, highly controversial organisation. And that's why, the kneeling is forever tied with that.
I mean, you can't divorce the kneeling gesture from that movement. And, of course, I suppose because of the name of the movement, Black Lives Matter, it's rhetorically very effective, because if you oppose it, people say, so you think Black lives don't matter? Yeah. And, of course, that's not what it's about. And you'll remember on the website of Black Lives Matter, there were all sorts of things like, we need to dismantle cisgender privilege, the nuclear family. So there was all sorts of other things wrapped up in this movement. It wasn't just about George Floyd.
And it was quite authoritarian too, like many woke movements. So if you expressed any dissent from the BLM agenda, you could get cancelled. So the Free Speech Union went to bat for a guy. He was a fan of a Premier League football club. He booed when the players in his club took the knee before a game. Yes. He was identified using kind of smart technology. His season ticket was suspended. He was hauled before this kangaroo court. We had to get him a barrister to stand up for him and say, no, he wasn't booing because he's a racist. He was booing because he disapproves of the agenda of BLM. And if the players were entitled to express their free speech on the pitch, why shouldn't the fans be able to say how they feel about it in the stands? But my main objection to taking the knee is it was just completely pointless. It was just virtue signalling nonsense. I mean, it kicked off in the 2020 to 21 season. And in that season, of the 92 clubs in English football, 7 had black managers. 7. So it was clearly completely ineffective when it came to making the English Football League a little bit more diverse. And where are we playing the World Cup this year? We're playing it in Qatar, where the stadiums were literally built by slaves. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Do you think they
pointless virtue signalling.
Will they be making gestures against the Qatari government while they're there? Do you think?
They might stretch to wearing rainbow laces, perhaps, even though it's still a crime punishable by death, I think.
Yeah, well, that would actually be impressive if they wore the rainbow flag in a country where it's actually being gay is illegal and punishable by death. I'd be behind the rainbow flag. But flying it outside of Wagamama, it doesn't achieve anything, does it?
That's correct. And it's worth pointing out some players like Wilfried Zaha did protest against the foolishness of it. He refused to do the kneeling. Some of the players think it is an anti-racism gesture. They don't see it as associated with BLM. I understand that. And also, just on the fans, it's assumed by people like Gary Lineker they're automatically racist, as if they're all thick. But actually, they're perfectly sophisticated. They understood that, no, this is something different. This is an organisation we just don't believe in.
You know, well, Gary Lineker's a misogynist now, isn't he, because of that tweet
he did?
True.
That's what he understands the BLM cause because he's dark-skinned and he experienced something like that.
That's right. Our next question now is from Paul. Where is Paul? Hello, Paul.
Hi. Was Martin Tyler right to apologise over the Hillsborough remark?
So, football commentator Martin Tyler has apologised for making a reference in a BBC interview to, quote, Hillsborough and other hooligan-related issues. Of course, 97 Liverpool fans died in a crush at Hillsborough Stadium. That was in 1989. After a long campaign, an inquest found in 2016 that the fans were not to blame and those who died were unlawfully killed. Now, Tyler has said he wanted to apologise sincerely and that there was no connection at all between the Hillsborough disaster and hooliganism. Was it just the case, Toby, that he just misspoke?
I think he did just misspeak, yeah. I mean, as you say, it's now been established beyond any doubt that hooliganism was not a contributory factor to the death of those Liverpool fans, and maybe he was sort of misremembering or something. But you know, he apologised almost immediately. So I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him lose his job. I don't think he should be cancelled over it. You know, he made a mistake. He's apologised. Let's move on.
Do you think that way, Nick, or do you think there's some issues are so sensitive that really you can't misspeak on them? No, they're being very, very harsh. He was literally one comma off not being cancelled. He said other hooligan-related matters. If it said other, comma, hooligan-related issues, you see what I mean? Then it said other issues relating to hooliganism, but this one wasn't to do with hooliganism. Right. The thing is, they think he's tying the two together. I think he's just misspoke. He's saying that Hillsborough was a problem, there was hooligan problems. He's not conflating them, which he said. But they say, no, he must be cancelled. He was conflating them. Why not believe him and say that actually it was just a mistake? OK, very interesting. Well, we've got one more question before the break, and this is from Andy. Where is Andy? Hi, Andy.
Hi. Are you looking forward to watching Ellie Simmonds on Strictly?
So, Ellie Simmonds, this is the Paralympic swimming gold medalist Ellie Simmonds has been announced as the 6th contestant to be part in Strictly Come Dancing. After retiring from competitive swimming in 2020 and going on to present, as well as make documentaries, including Ellie Simmonds, A World Without Dwarfism, the 27-year-old said she's bursting with excitement about joining the show, but also admitted she was petrified. I'm not a fan. I've never watched Strictly Come Dancing, but I know it involves dancing. And it's very strict. Is it difficult for someone who has, shall we say, different stature to dance in a ballroom-style event? This is one of the few issues I haven't got a view that will get me cancelled on, because I don't really know enough about it. I've never seen the show. Yeah. The producer just told me who this person was 10 minutes ago. He didn't know who she was? No. My only association with the show is my friend Sean got horribly cancelled over being in it, so I have a very bad association with it, because it's a show where everyone cheats on their partner. That's standard. Right? That's sort of what you meant. And if you're the right kind of person, you cheat on your partner, it's celebrated. But if you're the wrong... I'll give you an example. My friend Sean had a mild indiscretion with someone and was cancelled horrifically for a number of years, and it treated appallingly. Whereas the actual dancer girl that he had the indiscretion with, or woman, she got a theatrical show with her husband where she was celebrating her love through the medium of dance. So it all depends who you were. But bizarrely, it's a show where everyone cheats on their partners, and depending on your political status, you're either celebrated or condemned for it. That's all I know about it. Well, since Nick's not an expert, maybe Toby can tell us. Are there logistics about having someone of smaller stature in this competition?
Well, I suppose the issue is, are they going to find a professional dancer to dance opposite Ellie? Because otherwise it might be quite tricky. Yeah. But I thought the big issue for Strictly now is that they've run out of celebrities. So they're going into their 20th season and there really aren't any celebrities left they want to approach to be on the show. And I'm thinking, surely that was a problem way before now. I mean, if you've watched the show at all, I'd be amazed if I've heard of one person on the show, and that was 10 years ago.
Did Anne Widdecombe do it? I think, Anne Widdecombe did it.
Okay, so done it, yeah. Weathermen, news presenters. I'm amazed they haven't asked us, Andrew.
I mean, what, as a couple?
Well, I think they pay pretty good money. I'd be happy to do that.
Completely up for that. I used to do ballet as a kid. Anyway, let's move on. After the break on Free Speech Nation, artivism is a word we are hearing more and more, apparently. What does it mean? Alexander Adams has written a book about it. He's going to be here to explain all of that. Do not go away. See you in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Now, from Banksy to Extinction Rebellion, artivism, that's activism through art, is the art of our era. But is this fusion of art and activism all that it seems? British art critic and author for Spiked, Alexander Adams, joins me now to discuss his new book, out this week, which is all about this topic. Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew.
So, this is the book, Artivism, the Battle for Museums in the Era of Postmodernism. We can see it there on the screen. So, talk to me about this. What exactly is artivism?
Well, artivism is either activism through art or it's political art.
OK.
I suppose in the postmodern era, it's now morphed into something weird where you can just nominate something as art. So Duchamp nominated the urinal as art, and that became an art object and was exhibited in a gallery.
Yes.
So now what you've got is people saying, well, OK, we want to be politically active. What we're going to do is we're going to have like a drop-in legal centre and we're going to call it art. Or we're going to do a soup kitchen and we're going to call it art. And so suddenly you've got all sorts of things that have activism, which has moved into museums and which is now taking up the venues, the status and, most importantly, the resources of fine art. But it's actually political activism.
So I see this again and again, and it seems like the art establishment is very much on the side of activism. It's become a kind of activist movement. The Turner Prize last year was won by five activist collectives. And you can be sure that they wouldn't have won had the Turner body not approved of the political message behind their work. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you find is that the people on the left are always saying that everything is political.
Yeah.
But then, weirdly, some politics is more acceptable than other politics. So I've researched this book, and when it came to that, I found lots of organisations, activist organisations, working through art that were pro-migration. I didn't find any that were anti-migration. I find it interesting that there was no money going to that. There was no money going to any activism that was opposed to abortion or that was pro-Christian or that was sort of more traditionalist. All the activism that was being supported through state funding was all left-wing or progressive.
Now, of course, there's always been the potential for art and literature to be political in nature. And you can always have pedagogic work, but often it's boring. I mean, often it's quite banal. I think when I read a book and I'm being preached at, I tend to switch off. So why is this now considered so? Why is it so prevalent? Isn't it just bad art, a lot of it?
It is bad art. It's because it's permitted. What you've got is people moving into art who are not actually artists. They're actually activists, and often they say that they are activists. They're social activists. They want to change the world. So what happens is that they suddenly see this opportunity to do their activism in a very nice environment. They can go into a museum. They can go into these marbled halls and they can get nice meals.
They can be lauded for it, right?
They can be lauded. They get taxis back and forth. They get their expenses paid. And so they're fantastic. They can do their activism, but they can do it in a prestigious venue.
And they can still feel like they're anti-establishment while they're being, wined and dined by millionaires.
Yes.
Very strange. But when do you think this happened, where it became the norm for art to have an activist purpose?
Well, I trace back in the book where you had a group of Chicano artists in the 1970s who were involved with making murals and setting up workshops with the community.
Yeah.
And actually, this is quite laudable, and it was bringing in a lot of people into the art world and getting them involved with projects and educating them and exciting them. But I think that afterwards you came to a situation where you had all sorts of activism which could appropriate the title of art.
Yes.
And suddenly it became a lot more direct, it became a lot more didactic, and you had a lot of people coming in from outside telling communities what they thought that communities should be doing.
Yeah, OK. So then how do we tackle this? How do we reinstate the purpose of art for its own sake, you know?
You abolish the Arts Council, but abolishing the Arts Council is like abolishing the media, abolishing the mafia. Because they're absolutely tied into the Department of Culture. They're tied into the civil service.
Yes.
They have their tentacles in almost every arts organisation in the country.
Yes.
So if you go after them, you'd have like a tsunami of protest coming from not only the Guardian but every arts organisation in the country.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that if someone were brave or stupid enough to say abolish the Arts Council, they're in for a torrid time.
But is it just that people are misapprehending the purpose of art? You know, if we go back to Oscar Wilde's preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray, where he talks about good and evil are just raw materials for the artist, and there's no such thing as a moral book or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written, that is all. Now, that message appears to have been lost, I think. And I think maybe it's time that we come back to the idea that art doesn't have to be moral. It doesn't have to teach us things. You can represent evil phenomenon in a quite beautiful, interesting way, right? Yeah. So this is more interesting to me. I think.
And also it's possible to have great art which is also political. So Guernica, for example, you've got Delacroix, Liberty on the Barricades, you've got Goya's paintings of the massacre in Madrid.
Yes.
So these can be fantastic works of art and can also have a huge political message.
Yes.
So it's possible to do that if you're a really skilled artist, but of course the artists who are working today, the artivists, are not skilled at all.
So that's another important question. I mean, my understanding of the Duchamp urinal was that that was kind of a prank.
Yes.
And yet now that seems to become like normalised, that idea. You know, I could pick up that glass and sign it and say, and declare it to be art. And I can be talentless and still be successful.
Actually, that's what my art professor did. Michael Craig Martin, who was a teacher at Goldsmiths, his most famous sculpture was an oak tree, which was a glass of water on a shelf. And he said, "This is an oak tree." And people said, "What? This is meant to represent an oak tree?" He says, "No, I have transformed it into an oak tree."
Because I was just joking. But he actually did that. He actually did that.
Of course, he did that in the 1970s. Come on.
God, I'm so behind. OK. But so is it not possible that the artists who prioritise their activism just aren't very good at art?
Yes, but then, but then you could say that about the majority of artists at any time. But at least in the past, they were skillful. They had certain craft skills.
Yeah.
They could make a good painting. They could carve well, even though they might not have been of the highest quality.
Yes.
But today they can't even do that. What they do is they outsource it to craftsmen. And they are literally, you know, when you see sort of the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square, all of those sculptures have been made by craftsmen. They've been made by fabricators, in workshops.
Yes.
And they've simply had the artist come in and tell them, "Oh, I'd like something like this. Here's the maquette."
Yes.
Make it a sort of 7 foot tall.
Yeah, I mean, so we need to... Maybe it's about the art schools. It's about reinstating the importance of craft, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely. There's that, and then there's also... you might have a look at what's going on in the culture ministry. I mean, I think we've had, you have... The culture minister lasts for an average of about sort of 9 or 11 months before they're moved on, and that's even without change of government. So it's absolutely rudderless at the top.
Right. OK, well, much to think about. This is the book. It's called Artivism, The Battle for Museums in the Era of Postmodernism, so do check that out. Alexander Anders, thanks very much for joining me. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, Lawrence Fox will be here to talk about the Bad Law Project, plus some social sensations and unfiltered dilemmas. See you in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. My next guest, Lawrence Fox, has announced a campaign against the alleged politicisation of legal institutions. Lawrence Fox has named the campaign the Bad Law Project, and it is going to be high on the agenda for his political party, Reclaim. He recently filmed and shared a video online of an army veteran being arrested by police outside his home for, quote, causing anxiety by retweeting a meme. Let's take a look.
This is Lawrence Fox, the person who did the tweet. I'm Harry Miller. It's basically a big setup. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But you've set me up.
That's exactly it. You are about to arrest a man for posting an image on Facebook, and I ain't moving. So, big fella, I suspect you're the one that's going to arrest me. That's absolutely fine. Post this on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm a British Army veteran. Yeah, you should not be doing this to me.
You cannot criticise the ideology. If you criticise the new woke ideology, you criticise anything about all of this pride movement and all this stuff, you make any criticism of it whatsoever, you end up in cuffs. Know that.
Lawrence Fox, welcome to the show. You mentioned there on that video the British Gestapo. I mean, that seems hyperbolic, but...
So did your use of the word alleged over the thing. It's not alleged.
It's actually happening. But, you know, when we look at things like that, when we look at someone being dragged away in handcuffs for posting a meme on Facebook, it's difficult to defend that, isn't it? What are the arguments against your position here?
My dad is right. He phoned me this morning and he went, you could make the same point and just not be so aggressive about it.
Right.
And I was like... But we have a relationship with our police which is sort of familial and consensual and homely and all of that.
Yes.
And when the police become what they are, which is the modern-day early Gestapo, you've got to start shouting in their faces until they stop behaving like the Gestapo.
I suppose the counter-argument is that because you have, you know, these activists online, they will call someone a Nazi at a drop of a hat. They'll just always invoke the Third Reich, no matter what you do. You know, if you commit a microaggression, you're suddenly Goebbels, right? And I think that is probably unhelpful. And they might say, well, you're doing the same. You're invoking the Gestapo. You're changing the pride flag into a swastika symbol. Aren't you doing their tactics back at them? Or is that the point?
Yeah, that's the point, is to go, if I make a swastika out of pride flag, what's going to happen? I'm going to be, or this man in Darren's case, is going to be arrested for a thought crime. Now, look, let's deal in fact. The facts are, the man posted a meme on Facebook which happened to be a collection of pride flags assembled in the shape of a swastika, if you want to see, and he was arrested, first of all by 2 cops, then by 5, then by 7, and he was bundled into the back of a van and taken away to not the Basingstoke police station, but the Basingstoke Investigation Centre.
OK.
That's where he was taken.
That sounds like a terrifying dystopian place.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And in Basingstoke, of all places. Lovely. But the problem with this is it's right there in front of our eyes to see. So my dad's view is like, Loz, great, you're doing well. Try and point this stuff out and be more gentle about it. And I'm going, these guys are a political police force. So I don't treat them in the way that I would treat Dixon and Doc Green.
I understand. OK, so how is it that you... Because this, we all saw the video, it went viral. How is it that you were there and Harry Miller was there, and how did you know this was going to happen?
Yeah, so we started this thing called... because the government, or someone in the government, or someone somewhere, doesn't want the Reclaim Party to have a bank account.
Really?
Yeah, very much so. So we're in legal proceedings with banks to go, you've got to give us a bank account.
Yes.
So we thought, OK, well, we still want to fight the fight for everybody. So we started up the Bad Law Project, which is just to go... This is a terrible thing that's going on. So Darren Brady was visited by the police, smart enough to record everything, then sent his details over to us, and we picked it up. So I took myself and Harry, who knows the law better than every single copper in this land, as far as I can tell.
Well, I mean, Harry Miller was a police officer himself.
He was a police officer, and also he won a case against the College of Policing for this so-called non-crime crime, which is taking place all the time. So we just went down to stand in his kitchen. Then we did a Beatles about on him.
So that's what's going on in that video there, where you come up to the police officers and they're not expecting you to turn up.
Yeah. It's like, it's sort of fun TV the other way round.
OK.
It's like, oh, hello, Mr. Goebbels. You know, it's that.
Yes.
And as a result, you know, on a serious note, as a result, police procedure has been changed permanently and fully within a week.
Do you think, though, that it's sometimes the police are reluctant to do this and, you know, that they are being told... Because the College of Policing have said, you know, you must be investigating non-crime. You must be policing what people think and feel and say, you know... And maybe a lot of the cops themselves are thinking, oh, I want to do this, but I know I have to do this. Do you not get that sense?
Well, you know, I was just following orders is not a defence. So, tough.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. If you're going to do it, then you're as liable as the person who told you.
And why is it that, you know... We've had the Court of Appeal in Harry Miller's case saying that the recording of non-crime is illegal. We've had, or unlawful. We've had the Home Office instructing the College of Policing to get rid of it. And they've sort of just fudged their guidelines a bit, and they haven't got rid of it, really. They've changed it, I think, to something else. I can't remember what it is. OINC, something
well,
non-crime.
It's just we're going to carry on doing it whether you like it or not.
Right, basically.
It's essentially what their thing is. They're the armed wing of the woke movement, the police now. So people shouldn't trust them.
They're meant to be served without fear or favour. They're not...
all communities.
Right.
So, you know, you don't find them on Gay Uncle Day, which is coming up on the 16th of August. Where are they?
Gay Uncle Day?
On the 16th of August, it's Gay Uncle Day. Do you not have a trans...
I haven't heard of Gay Uncle Day.
Yes.
And I'm part of that community, right?
You are a right-wing extremist.
Am I? OK, yeah.
Gay Uncle Day is on the 16th of August.
Yes.
Where are the vans?
So,
with the coppers going, gay uncles are great!
See, people don't understand with, you know, all this satirical stuff about the, you know, the pride flag being rearranged. The point that being made there is, of course, there's an authoritarian element to the kinds of activists who fly that pride flag. And I think a lot of people interpret it as you basically saying gay people are evil, gay people are Nazis. Is it that basic?
I don't know any... None of my gay mates like pride. None of them do. We're sort of agreed that the original rainbow flag is kind of nice and beautiful and it stood for something. But all of these triangles that accidentally make a swastika with little dots in them about intersex and ACE, which is going to become a very big topic of conversation in this country.
Yes.
We're minutes away from putting paedophile on that flag.
You don't think that's a bit extreme, surely? I mean, that's...
Well...
I mean, surely, because, you know, I think where they've
Why
gone
are
wrong...
minor attracted people not represented on the progressive flag?
I know there have been some extreme activists who have been pushing for that.
Should they not be accepted?
No.
Why not?
It's illegal. Non-consensual activity is illegal, so obviously not. I mean, I'm with you that the original six-stripe flag was fine.
Yeah.
And the extra added things suggest an ideological step too far, in my view. That's what I would think.
I agree.
And I think there's a lot of... But I don't think we should go that far in terms of adding... you know, criminals into the flag.
Well, you've got Two-Spirit. What is that?
Two-Spirit? You're asking me, are you? You're putting me on the spot.
But I'm just saying, Two-Spirit is a sort of made-up thing from the 1993 about...
it's from an Indigenous American...
Yeah, from 1993, the Indigenous American thing.
Yes, it's not something I claim to understand.
So why not stick minor attracted person? And what's a QIA? What are these things? We all should and must stand up for gay and lesbian people in this world and transsexual people in this world. We must stand up for all of them because we all matter. Every single one of us matters. What we shouldn't stand up for is the political ideology behind it, which wants to mutilate children and take away children from their parents and their families.
So that's the point, isn't it? But that is such an important point. And you know, we've now got the closure of the Tavistock, which is a really important step forward. And so, therefore, you won't have these gay kids being sort of fast-tracked into medicalisation. And all of those points you make are so important. And what you say there about, you know, we've got to stand up for trans people, gay people, their rights, everyone's human, you know. But then, you know, it's like your father says, when you bring in the idea of maybe there'll be a paedophile on the flag next, maybe these people are the Gestapo, don't you think there is a case to be made that maybe let's rein that stuff in so we make the other case more persuasive? Don't you think you alienate some people by that kind of approach?
Yeah, I think probably I do. Yeah, because also it's a journey for me as well to understand it. And I obviously spent 22 years acting, which is not a good preparation for public life on any level.
Of course not,
because
probably the worst.
Someone just brings you bacon sandwiches, that's it. Right. But what you do get as an actor is instinct.
Yes.
And I know that this movement and this virus, this little woke virus, has tried to jump from several little, you know, cells to another. And we've ended up in this place where no words mean anything anymore. So you're putting in gay and lesbian people, which shouldn't be put in either at the same way anyway, because gays, most of my gay mates also don't have that many lesbian friends, for example. Why are we putting every single alphabet person who isn't a white, straight, pale male into a group like, oh, you poor little darlings.
Yeah,
we need to look after you. It's like, bollocks to that. Let's stand up and go, all of us, our human rights need to be respected, but this movement wants to chop off the genitals of young people. We wouldn't let Somali Muslims come. We don't want to... There's whole safeguarding in school around stopping girls as they enter their period of fertility being taken on a 5-week holiday in Somalia or somewhere else in the world to get their genitals mutilated. So why are we sitting and having police dancing around a flag which supports exactly the same ideology?
And it's interesting because we now have Richie Herron, for instance, a gay man, suing the NHS because his genitals were removed. That was the end point. Because it sounded hyperbolic. I'm just explaining that does happen.
I'm very hyperbolic, but none of what I'm saying is not true.
So do you think... I mean, how do you feel now that this is now... Your world is politics, isn't it? It's activism, really. And your background is not that.
I know.
It's such a shift, is what I'm saying.
I want to do acting. Like I saw the trailer for this My Son Hunter film, which is coming out next month, and it's great, and I'm better at it. But also, there's a problem in this world, and it's really, really running deep, and it's joining people from across the political spectrum. You and I would probably not agree on a great deal outside of not liking woke shit. So. I just feel like I've got to do it. I don't feel like I have a choice.
You feel almost like you've been herded into this direction and it wasn't...
Or called.
Right. OK, that's interesting. But it must have damaged your chances of getting certain roles with certain people because the acting world is so, and Hollywood in particular, is so captured.
I know. But I could always have a double mastectomy. No, I could have the opposite. I could always have some boobs put on.
I mean, you could, Lawrence.
Call myself Lauren Fox and go and demand to be cast as the lead in O.J. Simpson the movie. You know, it could happen. The world is that upside down.
Well, I mean, you've clearly thought about this as a potential route.
Yeah.
We haven't got much time. Tell me about the film, because this is about Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
You're playing Hunter Biden in the film.
I am.
And that's coming out next month?
It's coming out. I think they've now delayed the release because I'm away on holiday with the kids. But it comes out in, I think, either the end of August or beginning of September.
Okay.
And in time for the midterms. And it's a gangster comedy movie about the Biden family, written by 2 journalists who never get it wrong.
Okay.
So it's not really a political film. It's more a funny and sad film.
Yes.
And it's brilliant.
I mean, is it not kind of risky to make a film about someone who's still alive with a lot of money?
Well, actually, our set was infiltrated by his lawyers. So
really?
Yeah. It was mad. They said that they were with the South Park crew and they wanted to come and sort of parody it.
Okay.
But actually, it was Hunter Biden's lawyers. So, yeah, I mean, if I end up... I didn't kill myself.
Okay.
if I'm taken to Paddington Police Station because I've done something wrong, committed a non-crime hate incident...
Yes.
I did not kill myself.
OK, so that's now on record, on TV, so you can sleep well at night now, Lawrence. Lawrence Fox, thanks very much for joining me. So every week, we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media. We're going to look at some of the clips that have been going viral. And first up is this video. This is a video of the presenter Richard Madeley making his guest cringe by randomly calling her Coco, because that's what he calls his daughters. Look, I don't know what. Let's have a look.
Oh, God. So good. So good.
So you've not watched it? Keep going at it.
I've not watched it back. I can't wait.
When will you watch it?
Probably today after having that.
You're going to love it. You're going to love it. Have a sleep, watch the game and carry on celebrating because we're all so proud and grateful to all of you. Chloe, lovely to see you. Coco, as I call my daughter Chloe. Coco, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, look, but Richard Madeley has always put his foot in it. That's part of his charm, isn't it? It's quite endearing.
Not on this occasion. Chloe Kelly is a QPR fan. She came to the game yesterday. She gave the match football to the team captain at the beginning, and we won 3-2 against Middlesbrough, so she can do no wrong in my eyes. And Richard Madeley should be cancelled for calling her Coco.
Oh, well, Toby Young's had a change of heart now. But you are a QPR fan, which is...
it does colour my judgment slightly on this
people
question.
are quite militant about their teams, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think, Nick?
Well, I was walking through the studio to come back here and missed the entire clip. So
you haven't seen it?
I'm on the side of whatever won't get me cancelled.
I think that's a fair point. But I mean, I'm serious. I think Richard Madeley and Richard and Judy generally, but part of the reason people like to watch them is that they were so kind of gauche, weren't they? That was sort of...
Well, Richard Madeley, I like him. He tells the truth in a kind of Partridge-esque way, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Kind of like you, Andrew.
What? I mean...
You're the new Madeley.
Well, I didn't... Hey, I'd like to be half as successful as Madeley. I mean, you know...
Does that make you Judy, Nick?
I'm fine with it. Or you, we don't know, but I'm fine with it.
Or both. Maybe it's that kind of arrangement. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. So anyway, that was the footballer Chloe Kelly?
Chloe Kelly,
Chloe Kelly. OK, well, we've got another video now. This is... who is it? This is Richard Madeley's GMB co-presenter, Ranveer Singh, being less than flattering towards another of England's champion footballers.
Mead joins me now for her first interview since then. Wow, how are you? I mean, I'm not going to look a bit knackered, to be fair.
Thank you.
Your whole body is just, like, gone.
Yeah, it's relaxed. It's relaxed now.
Thoughts, Nick?
What was happening there?
I don't know.
None of us know what was happening. Was that one of the Lionesses?
It's one of the Lionesses, yeah.
I totally support the Lionesses. I love women's football. Please don't cancel me.
I suspect insincerity.
Toby?
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what was going on there. What was the gap? I couldn't quite see it.
No.
Was it the awkwardness of that pause?
Yeah, I think it was.
Because we have loads of those on this show, so that's
we do. I know it's not really doesn't really merit a discussion, does it? But seriously, when it comes to women's football, I mean, did you watch the final? No.
Hissing. Actual hissing.
No, that was strategic. I knew that they would turn against you.
Yeah, because it's the current thing, and you have to support the current thing. And you could see from the hissing I got there.
Yeah, actual
just
hissing.
from not watching it. I'm not even allowed to not watch it. What I said the other day was that the women's football has become a political Rorschach test because everyone's projecting their own politics onto it. So Julie Birchall sees a gender-critical triumph in her piece in the Mail.
Yes.
Whereas other people see some other thing. Everyone's got their own take on it at the moment, you know, because it's become the new culture war item.
Yes.
And everyone's just, you know, the BBC said there's too many white players, so they were immediately racist about it. And then whereas, you know,
yes,
Julie
right.
Birch was on a different side, so everyone's like, and Gary Lineker got cancelled for tweeting the wrong thing about it, much like I just got hissed right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
well, he tweeted a joke about the thing, and then the thing bra none.
He said bra none, it was just a play on words.
Yeah.
It was very innocent, but of course he was immediately attacked. So women's football is now the new political hot topic. You've got to, and it's new culture war.
I was surprised that you got hissed for saying that. I thought that was a bit much.
It was absurd.
You know, yeah.
I don't know. They should go on the BBC or something.
I mean, that's like, if you'd have been Leo Kearse, who was in the other day talking about how it's not really a victory, is it? Because they were playing against women, and it's easier to women against women.
Well, I noticed actually. I played football myself. I played five-a-side, but it's in North London. I made a few jokes like that because I was saying the keepers weren't very good and stuff, and I was basically hissed by the five-a-side football team. That's when I realised this is the current thing because you can't just make jokes about it. You have to support it. It's very important.
But are you a fan of the women's football?
Well, I have to confess, I hadn't watched a women's football game from start to finish until the final with the
So has
Lionesses.
this converted you?
So well, I was actually quite impressed. I thought, the levels of skill were quite impressive, and it's actually a pretty entertaining game. Though I was watching it with a group of males. I won't say who they were,
right?
And they weren't paying as much attention as perhaps they ought to have been. But when Chloe Kelly scored the winning goal, she celebrated. I said, "Oh my gosh, she's taken her top off to celebrate." At which point, it's like a sitcom. Suddenly, I'm shoved out the way on my mates. What? It was quite.
But surely there's
toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity. There we go. But I don't care about football anyway, no matter who's playing it. So so for me, this isn't a converting moment. But I think I'm seeing a lot of people now who were very sniffy about women's football now really enjoying it. There were millions and millions of people watch that, and I don't see why it's different. Like I can watch. I like women's tennis probably a bit more than men's tennis, to be honest, and I don't see why we treat football. Why is football such a singular masculine domain?
That's
I don't
actually
understand.
a key point that people are jumping on the bandwagon, because a lot of the people who were pro-biological men competing in women's sports, they've suddenly become very pro the Lionesses. And Julia Hartley-Brewer rightly called them out the other day, and she said, hang on, a lot of you people have been supporting the destruction of women's sports, whereas I'm the complete opposite. I have amazing integrity because I'm in favour of defending women's sports against biological males, and yet I'm not actually going to watch them, which I think shows incredible integrity.
One thing that slightly puzzles me about it is everyone said this is a great victory because these women who've won this incredible victory will be role models for young girls across the country who can now feel there's no barrier between them and taking up football. There's no excuse now for not having women's football on a par with men's football in schools. It's like the whole moral crusade is let's get more girls playing football. And I'm thinking, why? You want them to start swearing, drinking beer, behaving like louts? I mean, that's mainly what my male friends who play football do.
It's a good point. The manager said we want to create change in society. I'm thinking, isn't it just football? Why does it have to create changes? It can't just be a sport.
See, why is playing football a moral good?
Right.
Well, enough of the football chat, because I know nothing about it. We're going to move on now to a video that's gone viral this week of two groundhogs having a fight over a biscuit. Here we go.
哎呀，别推他，不要推他啊！来，你跟着分一点，来，快站起来！哎呀，别咬了我！
God bless the groundhogs. I mean, we have nothing to say about that, do we? Other than it's quite cute.
Quite cute, yeah. It's the sort of thing I see on my wife's Instagram reels.
No, I think it was a political dog whistle. Because you've got the capybaras now, which have become this weird...
Yes.
Leo Kurz keeps posting them, which I think must be like a far-right dog whistle. But then apparently they're actually socialists. He looked it up, and there's some sort of socialist...
I think everything Leo Kurz does is a dog whistle for something.
Yes. He drinks milk on live TV. I don't know what that's about.
Oh, yeah, he started drinking from a full bottle of milk on every appearance. It's very strange.
Classic white supremacy.
OK, let's move on now. This is the part where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas, and you do email in every week, and I do appreciate it. Our first dilemma was emailed in from Greg in Wandsworth. Hello, Greg. He says, I entered my fantasy football team online this week and called my team Cat Zuma in reference to the player who got done for kicking a cat. Someone in my work league has reported my team name as offensive, and now I need to come up with something less rude. Should I just leave the group? Nick, you must have something on this.
I'm sure I can, yes. Well, Cat Zuma, quite amusing. There are people laughing in the studio now. I laughed. It's funny. It's not funny that he kicked the cat, but Cat Zuma's a funny team name. And what's happened is he's working with a load of dorks who've reported him. And this is a problem. I've got a five-a-side football team, but when Boris Johnson was in trouble, they all started WhatsApping about how horrible Boris was. And I was like, oh, and I've got to look at all this rubbish. So it is annoying.
Yeah.
But because you want to be in... I want to play football. He wants to be in the league. So there's a problem. What he should do is, just leave and find a different fantasy football league that accepts his offbeat humour.
There is something about, like, people are very wary about making jokes now, because they might be misconstrued. I mean, you must hear this all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly in the workplace, where, there is now this kind of Stasi-like trend. People dob each other in all the time and try and get them into trouble with their bosses.
Speaking of which, because we haven't got much time, Toby, you do run the Free Speech Union, you founded it, and it does protect a lot of people who do find themselves in this kind of hot water. Maybe just tell people how they can get in touch, or whether they should become members.
Yeah, well, if you're in any way concerned about being cancelled for something you said at work, Nick, perhaps you should become a member.
It's too late for him.
You can join for as little as £2.49 a month. We also organise events. We had a speakeasy with Andrew. We're doing another one shortly about his upcoming book. It's essentially an insurance scheme. So, if you fear that someone might come after you, an outrage mob might come after you because of something you've said at work, even if you didn't intend to offend anyone, we will go to bat for you. We've got a team of lawyers, we've got PR experts, we've even got a psychological counsellor to give you a bit of advice.
They've got dark money behind it. There's a lot of funding.
But it's great because, you know, when you launched the Free Speech Union, a lot of the sceptics, you know, were very sniffy about it. And you've been vindicated. You've really, really saved people from losing their jobs, people who've been held out to dry. It's really important.
When we set it up, people, you know, the same old story that I'm sure the same thing they say to you about this show, which is that there isn't a free speech crisis. It's a culture war trope invented by Daily Telegraph readers. You're just pandering to people like Donald Trump and Alex Jones. And actually, more and more people are getting cancelled every day. And there's no one to stick up for them, no one to go to bat for them. It happened to me, it happened to you. And I realised that there needed to be an organisation that, if you found yourself in this situation, there'd be someone to turn to for some proper professional help. And so that's what the Free Speech Union is.
Well, thanks, Toby, and thanks for everything you do. And thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Mock the Week was cancelled, Beowulf got slapped with a trigger warning, and Batgirl bit the dust. So thank you very much to my panel, Toby Young and Nick Dixon, and to my guests, Graeme Linehan, Aaron Brown, Joanna Williams, Alexander Adams and Lawrence Fox. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our lovely audience, or if you just want free food, we've got that, we've got drinks. They're tanked at the moment. They're completely out of their heads. So please go to www.sroaudiences.com. It's right there on the screen, and you can come and be part of the fun. Stay tuned now for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. Don't forget, Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late-night paper preview show where comedians talk you through the next day's top news stories. Thank you for watching Free Speech Nation. See you later.
Weather now, and a fine start to the morning on a Monday for most, after early mist and fog patches have cleared. Let's take a look at the details. Across northern Scotland, a mostly dry and fine start, though there will be some patchy cloud. In the far north and northwest, there will be some light rain and drizzle. After an early morning, rural mist and shallow fog patches have cleared Northern Ireland. It will be dry and fine with plenty of sunshine. For northern England, it will be a dry morning. There'll be some patchy cloud around at first, though this will break up later. There may be some isolated early mist or patches of low cloud around for northern Wales to start the new week. These will quickly clear, though, to leave a dry and fine day. For the East Midlands, it will be a bright and dry start to Monday. There will be some patchy cloud around at times, though there will still be plenty of early morning sunshine. A similar outlook for East Anglia in the morning, with plenty of sunshine to start the day, a little cloud around for North Norfolk, and some coastal areas for a time. Very little cloud around on Monday for southern England and remaining dry. It'll feel warm to start, especially in the east, where temperatures will remain in the low to mid-teens overnight. A fine morning across the UK with